Good morning. Welcome to Burnside School and 4th grade. We would like to share with you some crafts and some things that we've done as a result of 3 books that we've read by Laura Ingalls Wilder. The children have made many things and we've done many crafts that we would like you to know about. First, I'd like to introduce Brian Hodge, who will give you a summary of the book that his group did.
Little House on the Prairie was written by Laura Ingalls Wilder and illustrated by Garth Williams. The main characters were Caroline, known as Mom, who was a kind, gentle woman. Charles, known as Pa, had a beard and was hard-working. Mary, the oldest child, was a nice young lady, and Laura was very playful. And baby Carrie was 1 or 2 and very sweet. The Ingalls had 2 neighbors. One was Mr. Edwards, who was a bachelor, tall, skinny, and very helpful. There was Mr. Scott, a short, fat man, and married. In the story, the Ingalls moved from a town in Wisconsin to Indian Territory. Also in this story, you had an idea of what life was on the prairie and how the Indians lived. So they started out crossing creeks, going over tough territory with all of their goods in a covered wagon. At last they settled and made a house. On summer nights, they would hear wolves cry. That Christmas was Laura's best one. She had a piece of candy, cake, and a tin cup, and 1 penny. One week, the Ingalls didn't sleep because of the terrible Indians' war cries. Then spring came, and the Ingalls planted crops. At the end, they had moved again, but it was a happy ending. From this book, I've learned a lot on how people lived in the 1800s. I think this was a good book because how interesting it was.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Next, I'd like to introduce John Erickson, who will read a character sketch from the book that his group read.
Hello, my name is Amanda Wilder. I'm 8 years old. I have 1 brother, Royal, and 2 sisters, Alice and Eliza Jean. I also have a mother and a father. I usually go to school in the winter. Sometimes at school, Big Bill Ritchie and his gang show up. It just so happens he shows up now. He got in trouble with Mr. Corse. One day, Mr. Corse says, "Bill Ritchie, come up here." Bill said, "Come on, boys." They started to run up to the front. Mr. Corse pulls out a whip. He whipped Bill Ritchie a lot of times. That was the last I saw of Bill Ritchie. For my birthday, I got a sled and a yoke. Since I had a yoke, I tried it out. I got to break the calves. When harvest came, it wasn't fun because we couldn't play. When Independence Day came, we went to the town square. People were setting off cannons. At the country fair, it was almost the same. My pumpkin won first prize. For Christmas, I got pound candy and a new pair of mittens, an orange, a little package of dried figs, and a jackknife. That day, all of my family came over. A few weeks later, my father let me go wood hauling. That didn't work out too well. That spring, Mr. Thomas had lost his pocketbook. Luckily, I found it. All he gave me was a dime, and he called me a thief. He ended up paying me $200, thanks to Mr. Paddock. My life is sometimes nice, sometimes, and bad sometimes. But I'm always happiest on the farm.
Okay, thank you, John. John's group read Farmer Boy. Kathy's group read On the Banks of Plum Creek, and Kathy Ferretti will read a summary of one of the chapters that a couple of her friends and herself acted out. Kathy?
I'm dressed up as Nellie Olson from a chapter on the banks of Plum Creek. Nellie was a pain. She always picked on Laura Ingalls. In the chapter Town Party, Laura, Mary, Christy, and Cassie went to a party at Nellie Olson's house, which is behind her father's store. At the party, Nellie shows off her China doll and wax doll. When Laura Ingalls tries to touch Nellie's wax doll, Nellie makes a big thing about it. The children had lemonade and sugar white cake. When the party was over, all the girls thanked Mrs. Olson for such a nice time.
Okay, Kathy, thank you. Next we have Bob Hockenbrock and Michael Haupt, who did a model of a tin peddler's cart from their book, Farmer Boy. You want to tell us about it, boys?
This is a model of the tin peddler's wagon. In the winter, he would make tin, and then in the spring, he would go around the lane and trade the tin for goods. When he came to Lamonta's house, Mother did the trading. Mr. Brown said, "I'll trade you the milk pans and pails, colander and skimmer, and some baking pans for a lot of rags." So they traded. While Mr. Brown, the tin peddler, was there, he sang songs, and before he left, he gave Eliza Jane 6 little diamond-shaped patty pans and Alice heart-shaped ones and Almanzo a red horn.
Okay, thank you, boys. That obviously took a lot of work. Our class also made 2 quilts. One was a then quilt and a now quilt. And Peter will tell us about how we did the now squares. Then squares, excuse me. Go ahead, Peter Long.
In Ingalls' time, people made quilts by hand. In 4th grade, we made then quilts. We have taken a piece of material and some embroidery floss. First, we sewed the edge of it and then drew our initials. To embroider do embroidery stitches, you sew backwards. When we were done, we sewed them all together.
Okay, Peter, thank you. Sean Wolfram, would you tell us about the now quilt?
This is one of the squares from the now quilt. Everyone in the 4th grade did one. On the quilt, we were supposed to draw what we like. We had to do all our letters and numbers backwards. We had to do a rough copy and a good copy. On our good copy, we colored it in with fabric crowns. Then we had to get a piece of material 12 by 12 inches and put it on our good copy on material. Next, we ironed the good copy until it transformed onto the piece of material. The last thing we did was sew around the pictures we drew. Since it is a nail quilt, Mrs. Passmore sewed it together with a sewing machine.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Sean. Another thing our group did was natural dyeing, and Angie Vassilatos will show you the shirt that she did and tell a little bit about how it was done.
Tie-dye was a major activity for my whole class. First, we had to bring in a white t-shirt. Then my reading teacher, Mrs. Masterson, blew out some blueberries and some strawberries. Then she sprayed what she had boiled so we wouldn't have the skins mixed in with the dye. Then we tied rubber bands on our t-shirts where we wanted a design. Next, we put our t-shirts in the red or the blue dye. We let them soak overnight. The next day, we took our t-shirts out of the dye and untied the rubber bands. Where we had tied the rubber bands left a design, and our t-shirts were dyed what color we could remove the dye.
Okay, Angie, I bet you had fun doing that, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
All right, another thing that the group did was we made hand-dipped candles, and Jennifer Buno will tell you how that was done. Jennifer?
In our reading group, one of the activities was candle making. This is how we did it. We first melted down paraffin. We added crowns for color. On the first dip, we counted to 10. Thereafter, each dip was just in and out. These candles took approximately 45 dips.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Another thing that some of the children did was to make things, and Jamie Shingler will tell you about how she made donuts.
Well, one of the activity cards, we had to bring home and our book and reread chapter 7 with our mom. And if you were lucky, then you could talk your mom into making donuts. And I was lucky, and my mom helped me make donuts. And when we made the donuts, I made the newfangled donuts. And Amante's mother didn't like to make the newfangled donuts because she thought they took up too much time having to turn them over and having to make the holes and everything. So she made colors and just put them in the oil or whatever, and they turned themselves over.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. She brought them in to share with us, and I was lucky enough to get to taste one. They were very good. Okay, Jesse, would you like to tell us about covered wagons?
The pioneers traveled west in covered wagons. The wagons were big and strong. They were covered with a cloth top. The wagons were pulled by oxen or horses. There were no bridges over the rivers, so some of the wagons were shaped like boats. The pioneers crossed the rivers in their boat-shaped wagons. The pioneers filled their wagons with many things. They took food, clothes, seeds, furniture, and tools in their wagons.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Josie. That's quite a nice model you've made. We have two young ladies who have done a model of the Wilder homestead, and we would like them to explain that to you. Next, I would like to introduce two young ladies who have built a model of the Wilder homestead. They both read Farmer Boy. This is Christine Getty on my right and Lynn Kaler on my left. Lynn?
This is a model of the Wilder homestead. In it is the house. You can see the parlor, the kitchen, and the 2 bedrooms. Also, there are all the great barns. There's the South Barn, Horse Barn, and the Big Barn. They also have a shed that is for the wood and an ice house for the ice. As you might have noticed by now, by how big their farm is, the Wilders are quite wealthy. There are 6 people in their family. They are father, mother, Royal, Eliza Jane, Alice, and finally the main character, Almanzo.
Okay, thank you, girls. You certainly went to a lot of trouble to create this model, which is quite complete. We hope you've enjoyed listening and hearing about some of the projects that the children in our class have done. We think they've enjoyed reading the books from the Laura Ingalls Wilder series, and that they've learned a lot about the early history in their country.